021, The Powerful Munich 1860 Youth Training. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The defense is set, now let's check out the midfield. Truth is, our midfield is a little thin, only 3 guys. First up is Sandro Kaiser, who's just shy of 20. He's an offensive midfielder, about 5 feet 10 inches, came up through the ranks at Munich 1860, and just got his shot with the first team this season. Before that, he put in some time with the second team, played 30 games, and racked up 5 goals with 7 assists. His ceiling's not super high, probably tops out as a solid Bundesliga-level player. Tong Yi sized up Kaiser, kind of a skinny kid with high cheekbones, and figured he might not be exactly what he was looking for. Doubt he'd see much play this season. Next is Jose Holebas. He's 25, around 6 feet tall, and can play left wing or left midfield. He's not a Munich 1860 homegrown guy. He joined the second team at 22 and got bumped up to the first team last season. Scored 12 goals in 43 games for the second team. This dude's one of the few on the current roster that caught Tong Yi's eye. His potential's sitting at a solid 141. Tong Yi pegged him to be a legit player, maybe even a top performer. In a major league. Tong Yi took another look at this intense guy. Something about him seemed familiar. Wait a sec. Wasn't Holebas playing for Roma and Watford later on? No wonder his potential is high. He exceeds most people at Munich 1860, but didn't he play left back then? Why is he at left mid and left wing? He'd ask about it when he had a chance. Tong Yi added a star next to Holebas's name. He'd be a key player this season. His current strength is already at 129, so he's in a good place. Lastly, there's Daniel Bayerovka. He's 30, about 5 feet 10 inches, and plays left wing. He came up through Bayern Munich's youth system, but never cracked their first team. Still, he's no slouch. He got a call up to the German U21 national team. Then he moved to Munich 1860, where he played so well he got a nod for the German national team in 2002. Even played in a friendly against Austria before the World Cup and scored a goal in his 3 national team appearances. But he got cut before the World Cup in Japan and Korea. After that, he bounced around to Bayer Leverkusen and Stuttgart, became a well-known player in the Bundesliga. He came back to Munich 1860 in 2007 and became their go-to guy. Tong Yi glanced at this handsome, blonde-haired dude with sapphire eyes. Okay, he's getting up there in age and is lying about his strength, but he's still one of the few on the team that's rocking a rating over 120. Now it made sense why Holebas was playing left back later on. Bayerovka had the left mid and left wing positions locked down. Bayerovka has Fuka covered. If Holebas wanted more minutes, he needed to drop back. Tong Yi knew all about Bayerovka. He was a stud in the Bundesliga, even took 3rd place with Leverkusen alongside guys like Lucio and Berbatov. Seriously good player, but this season, Tong Yi might not automatically hand the starting job on the left over to the veteran. It's not that his skills have slipped so much, but because his defense is always lacking. He basically just attacks but does not defend. Tong Yi's tactics rely on relentless defense and pressing. That means defending starts right up front, so Bayerovka probably wouldn't be a starter. But he'd definitely be a regular off the bench. He's still got a wicked burst of speed on the wing and can shoot the lights out. He would be effective if he comes in occasionally. Tong Yi circled Bayerovka's name. That's the midfield situation for Munich 1860. Even with Matic coming in, it's still not enough. He's gonna need to make some moves in the transfer window. Just then, Joanna sashayed over with some paperwork and said sweetly, "Boss, some of the older guys aren't in the best shape. We can't push them too hard in training. Especially Daniel, he's really run down. If he overdoes it, he's risking an injury." Tong Yi, ignoring the flirt, frowned and took the info from Joanna, reading carefully. Sure enough, Bayerovka's not looking good. His muscle endurance is way down, and his cardio's shot, too. Looks like Bayerovka is definitely not making the starting lineup this season. Tong Yi asked Joanna, any way to help him out? Get him back to a decent level. Joanna rolled her eyes. Yeah, rest. He needs to rest for a while. Tong Yi was speechless. Duh. And didn't Ballon take an off-season? Why is he still so wiped out? Guess he's really showing his age. Tong Yi checked in on the Hoffman brothers. What about them? Can they handle training? Joanna glanced at them and said, they're even worse than Danny, they can manage if they grit their teeth. But they'll need physical therapy after every session. Tong Yi raised an eyebrow. He thought for a second and asked, will that hurt them in the long run? Increase their chances of getting hurt? Joanna tossed her hair. Boss, trust our physical therapy skills. With us around, they're not gonna be any more likely to get hurt. Tong Yi might not totally trust Joanna, but he trusted Wagner, so, hearing that from Joanna put him at ease. Tong Yi said, okay, I get the picture. I'll let the coaching staff know. Carry on. Joanna nodded and got back to it. Truth be told, Ballon's situation threw Tong Yi for a loop. He lost some firepower there, good thing it wasn't a huge deal. Tong Yi turned his attention back to his players. All that was left now were the forwards. The one forward who gave Tong Yi a glimmer of hope was Benjamin Lauter. He's 28, 5 feet 7 inches, and came up through the Munich 1860 youth system. Played 61 games from 2000 to 2004 with 22 goals. He also played for the German U18 and U21 national teams, and for the German national team in 2003. He played 5 times for the team, but didn't score. After Munich 1860 got relegated in 2004, he moved over to Hamburger SV in the Bundesliga, played 47 games and scored 10 goals. Then he played 32 Bundesliga games with Stuttgart and Hannover 96, scored just 1 goal. Last year, he came back to Munich 1860 and led the team in goals. Scored 16 times in 37 appearances and rediscovered his scoring touch. He's still got what it takes to play in the Bundesliga. This version of Lauter is more composed. This season, Tong Yi would still lean on this bearded dude. He added a star to Lauter's name. The second striker is a veteran, Antonio Di Salvo. He's 30, over 6 feet, and used to play for Bayern Munich. Then he went to Rostock. He joined Munich 1860 in 2006 and scored 11 goals between 2006 and 2008. He disappeared last season and didn't see any playing time. Tong Yi cast his eye on the balding guy. He was already on the decline, and kind of rapidly. His strength is dropping out of 100. Probably won't get much playing time this season. The last guy is Manuel Schäffler. He's 20 this year and came up through Munich 1860's youth system. Since 2007, he's been bouncing between the first and second teams. He has scored a total of 15 goals in the league and is favored by the youth coaches. He played for the German U20 national team last year and scored some goals. Makes sense the coaches are high on him. But Tong Yi took a look at this young forward, and realized that he just wasn't going to be that good. Tops out as a mid to low Bundesliga B player, maybe even German third division level. Looking at these strikers, Tong Yi felt a little freaked out. He needed to bring in some strikers, ASAP. Was the €5 million that Baker gave him really enough? Looks like Tong Yi's gonna be bargain shopping, maybe even snagging some free agents. Just then, Tanner, the youth team coach, came over with a couple of young players. He approached Tong Yi and said, David, these two are standouts on the youth team. They're not gonna get any better staying with the second team. Thought I'd bring them by, see if they might have a shot with your team. Tong Yi checked them out. They were a bit of a surprise. Their potential was solid. One of them, with the slick back hair, has a potential of 140. That guy could make a big league team. Seeing Tong Yi's interest, Tanner said, this is Stefan Einer. He's 22. He was out on loan, but now he's back. He's pretty good, can play on the wing or in the midfield, and he can score. Tong Yi nodded. He valued Einer. The other one wasn't as impressive, but his potential had reached 130, and he had the opportunity to play in the top league. Tanner introduced him. This is Tal Kandar. He's got dual German and Turkish citizenship. He's 18 and just got called up to the German U19 team. He's a right back. Not bad. If Walker came, he could stick around as a sub. Looking at these young guys, Tong Yi couldn't help but think that the youth training for Munich 1860 is incredible. Look how many players that have given to the team and to the German youth team. 022, several major player factions in the first team. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Munich 1860's youth program has been producing some amazing talent over the years. Think about the Bender brothers and Johnson from the past. Now, you've got guys coming up from the second team, plus Bobby Wood and Kevin Warland still in the youth ranks. And Weigel is set to join the 1860 youth setup. They've really been churning out quality players lately. The problem is, Munich 1860 is always broke, and they're forced to sell players every year. All that youth development often ends up benefiting other Bundesliga teams. You have to wonder how many of these current guys will be gone soon, right? Suddenly, Wagner walked over to Tong Yi and handed him a bag. Tong Yi jumped back, startled. Seeing it was just Wagner, he relaxed a bit. He eyed the bag suspiciously. What's this? Wagner rolled his eyes, pulled out a green jujube with his left hand, and took a big bite right in front of Tong Yi. The crunch and burst of juice seemed to make Wagner deliriously happy. Tong Yi couldn't help but gulp. Wagner said, "Don't you usually chow down on green dates? You always had a stash with you. I haven't seen you eating any today. Here, I've got some. Thought I'd share." He took another bite. Crunch. Tong Yi was a little surprised. He hadn't realized his former self had such a habit. Thank God there aren't any people that know the real me recently, he thought. He reached out, grabbed a couple, wiped them off on his pants, and popped one in his mouth. A satisfying crunch, and his mouth flooded with sweet juice. Delicious. So crispy and sweet. After just one bite, Tong Yi was hooked. I could get used to these. Wagner gave Tong Yi a long, hard look, scrutinizing him. Tong Yi's hand froze mid-air, holding the dates. What's with the stare down? He mumbled. Wagner was dead serious, his voice low. Who are you? David never touched this stuff before. The hairs on the back of Tong Yi's neck stood on end. A wave of cold dread washed over him from his toes to the top of his head. Has he figured it out? Does Wagner suspect I'm a time traveler? No way. Where did I slip up? How do I explain this? Are they going to drag me to some secret lab and dissect me? Will I become the first time traveler captured and studied? Tong Yi's mind raced, searching for a way out. He didn't even notice the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He tried his best to appear calm, as cool as a cucumber. He took another bite of the date, chewing slowly, and said, I thought I was doing a good job of hiding it, but I didn't expect you to discover it. I'm showing my hand. I'm not pretending anymore. I am a time traveler. You know a time traveler, right? My body is still this body, but the soul is no longer the original soul, but comes from another parallel time and space. Do you know parallel time and space? According to quantum theory, after an event occurs, different consequences can occur, and all possible consequences will form a universe. Wagner suddenly rolled his eyes and interrupted Tong Yi's babbling. Whoa, hold up, Sherlock. I was just messing with you. Shut it down, my head's about to explode. Tong Yi wasn't giving up. But what I'm saying is true. I believe in parallel universes and time travelers. Wagner crossed his arms, blew a puff of air at Tong Yi, and said coldly, how about we cut the crap with this drawn-out joke, buddy? Tong Yi said calmly, aren't you even a little curious about parallel universes? Wagner rolled his eyes with exaggerated impatience. Nope, not even a little bit. If you don't drop this, I swear I'll kick your butt into next week. Tong Yi shrugged. Your loss. You're missing out on some incredible stories. Wagner, never one to mince words, just said, shut up. Tong Yi immediately mimed zipping his lips shut with his finger. Hearing Wagner's dismissal, Tong Yi let out a silent sigh of relief. Dodged a bullet there. I'm a genius. Wagner also breathed a sigh of relief. He shoved another green date into Tong Yi's hand. Green dates are loaded with vitamin C, vitamin B, carotene, calcium, phosphorus, all that good stuff. They call them vitamin pills for a reason. Eat up. Asterisk crunch, asterisk Tong Yi took another bite. These really are great, he told Wagner. Seeing Tong Yi enjoying the dates, Wagner handed him some papers. The player physicals are done. Some of the results won't be back until tomorrow, but based on what we have so far, your guys are in pretty good shape overall. A couple of minor issues here and there, but nothing that should affect your upcoming physical training. Tong Yi glanced at the report. Sure enough, there was a note about Irovka's health, but the rest looked fine. He remembered Joanna's concerns and asked, what about the older guys, like the Hoffman twins? Joanna said their fitness wasn't the greatest. Wagner said, right, their fitness has dipped a bit. They're also showing some fatigue, not quite at their peak. But with our amazing physical therapy team, they'll be able to handle the high-intensity preseason training. No worries there. Of course, it'll take some effort on their part. They'll have to dig deep. Hearing that, Tong Yi was satisfied. He said, physical training's rough on the veterans, but we need that high-intensity preseason. I'll talk to them, make sure they're on board. You keep an eye on their condition. Wagner nodded, letting him know he understood. Tong Yi suddenly said, if everything's good, I'll pass this along to Antonio. Seeing the Munich 1860 players already assembled, Wagner grabbed the report from Tong Yi. Better let me give it to Coach Pintus. There are some details I want to discuss with him. You should probably get over there, they're waiting for you. Seeing that the players had gathered and were waiting for him, he stopped. Seeing Tong Yi nodding, Wagner immediately took the information and walked towards Wagner. Tong Yi walked toward the Munich 1860 players, assessing them as he went. Based on their positions, it was clear the team was divided into three factions. First, you had the veterans, led by the Hoffman twins. Their crew included the Hoffman brothers, Disseval, and Beat. Rovka and Lauter. The second group was made up of players from the second team of the youth team. This faction wasn't necessarily loyal to Tong Yi, but to the club itself. They were the biggest group, mostly guys who'd played together on the second team and were already tight. This faction had a large number of people, and they were quite interested in seizing power. The third, and smallest, group was the foreign contingent. Just two guys, Beta, a French center-back, and Gavanianids, a Georgian international center-back. Tong Yi didn't particularly care about the factions. He was fine with the players having their own cliques, as long as it didn't affect the team's performance. Tong Yi looked at the players. Okay, I need to remind you guys again, in the new season, my tactics require everyone to pitch in on defense. The forwards are the first line of defense. No matter where we lose the ball, you need to press them immediately. Even if you can't win it back, you can't let them pass calmly. Force them to pass back or make a mistake. At the very least, you need to slow down their transition from defense to offense so they can't hit our back line directly. Got it. The Munich 1860 players looked nervous, especially the veterans, who looked skeptical of Tong Yi's tactics. Tong Yi continued, basically, we're going to press high up the field. When we win the ball back, we need to launch a quick counterattack, passing the ball quickly and directly to attack the goal. We want to put as much pressure as possible on whoever has the ball and whoever's receiving it. To make this work, we all have to move together, and we have to be willing to run. The Munich 1860 players were already exhausted just listening to him, especially the veterans. Tong Yi said, that takes serious stamina, so you need to be ready to push yourselves in the upcoming training. In other words, your physical training is going to be really hard. I hope you're all mentally prepared. I'm saying this again because it's important, and you shouldn't be annoyed with me for repeating myself, because it's for your own good. The Munich 1860 players immediately straightened up. They knew hard times were ahead. Tong Yi continued, go home and get some rest today. Let your families know we're starting a 2-week physical training camp. During that time, you'll all be living at the club, no going home. Make sure you tell them. At that, the 1860 Munich players exploded with grumbling. Many didn't understand. Hadn't they been following the training system all along? Why the sudden need for a camp? They couldn't accept it, especially the old players. Tong Yi said coldly, this is the coaching staff's decision. It's not up for debate. If you can't handle it, you better get ready to spend the new season on the bench. He waved his hand, dismissing them, ignoring their protests. Tong Yi walked over to Pintus. Starting tomorrow, these guys are all yours. The physical training is in your hands. I need to focus on signings. This team is way too thin right now. Pintus nodded. Leave it to me. No problem. 023, Hostility from a decorated veteran. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The Munich 1860 players were in for a rude awakening. The grueling, monotonous physical training had begun. Every day, the players were pushed to their limits by Pintu's workouts. Afterwards, they were too beat to even complain, just dog-tired. It's no surprise they were griping, and in their hearts, they were cursing Tong Yi. That's right, Tong Yi, not Pintus. It was hard to hate Pintus. He wasn't just barking orders from the sidelines. Pintus would get out there and train with them, sometimes even pushing himself harder than the players. They respected him for that. No wonder he'd become Juventus's top physical coach. Plus, they could feel the effectiveness of Pintu's methods. He used training techniques they'd never seen before, which really opened their eyes. Pintus was great, but he didn't cut them any slack, so, naturally, the players were bad-mouthing Tong Yi in private. That guy had basically handed off all the physical training to Pintus and was playing the absentee boss. Every day, he'd show up in a black suit, black trench coat, and sunglasses, standing on the sidelines like a statue, just watching. Tong Yi had it way too easy. It was almost sadistic. Did he actually enjoy seeing them suffer? Torben was fuming, glaring at Tong Yi with bloodshot eyes. He turned to Hoffman and said, breathing heavily, I can't take it anymore. Why are we being run into the ground like this while that damn Chinese guy just stands there, watching? Di Salvo, too tired to even nod, chimed in, yeah, I think this Chinese dude is trying to break us, not build us up. He's doing this on purpose to make us submit to him. Di Salvo, being older and slower, was struggling the most. He knew his career was winding down and that no amount of training would guarantee him a spot in the new season. He didn't see the point in killing himself like this. So, when someone finally spoke out against Tong Yi, he was all for it. Hoffman nodded approvingly at Di Salvo and said, Antonio's right. I think this Chinese guy is trying to get rid of us so he can control the team. Saving our strength? That's bull. Hoffman was about ready to lose it from this insane physical training. After every session, his body felt like it was going to fall apart. He had to spend hours in the training room getting physiotherapy and massages. He was completely fed up, and after all these years, he'd never seen physical training this crazy. In his mind, this wasn't normal training at all. It was a deliberate attempt to mess with them. Hoffman's face was grim, his body also feeling the strain. This was too much, and he thought his old body wouldn't be able to handle it. He also had his doubts about Tong Yi's intentions. But seeing Pintus lead by example and train with them, he couldn't say anything. However, hearing Hoffman and Di Salvo complain made the anger in his heart simmer. Hoffman saw what Hoffman was thinking and immediately poured gasoline on the fire. If he was serious about saving our strength, it would make sense for the field players to train so hard. But boss, you're the goalkeeper. How much energy do you even expend during a game? Why do you need to go through this torture? It's insane. Di Salvo nodded enthusiastically, exactly. I see it now. The Chinese guy is trying to break us, not build us up. Hoffman couldn't help but turn and glare at Tong Yi, the statue-like figure on the sidelines. His anger spiked. Hoffman immediately suggested, boss, why don't we just quit and call his bluff? What's he going to do? We're the veterans of this team. Di Salvo chimed in, yeah, boss, you're the legendary captain. If you stand up, the rest of the team will follow. You've got that kind of charisma, and the younger guys are sure to support you. I've heard them complaining too, they hate this softy just as much as we do. Hoffman's eyes lit up, and he jumped in, Antonio's right. If you stand up and use your influence. Shut up. Hoffman snapped. He turned and glared at DeSalvo, yelling, calm down. Then, he turned his head and rolled his eyes at Hoffman. This guy is too dumb. Doesn't he realize he's being used as a pawn? And he keeps saying nice things to others. He's really stupid. DeSalvo was trouble. Although he was unhappy with Tong Yi's behavior, Hoffman knew that if he jumped out and confronted Tong Yi now, he'd be asking for trouble. He wasn't an idiot, Hoffman said, now's not the time. You two need to focus on training. We'll wait and see what happens. After training, if it has no effect and is of no use to the tactics of the new season, you can see how I will deal with him then. I will hold back any anger in my heart for now. After saying that, Hoffman glared at Tong Yi, the man in black on the sidelines, and then gritted his teeth and said to the two of them, train. Hoffman and DeSalvo were disappointed, and their hatred for Tong Yi intensified. However, neither dared to oppose Hoffman, so they grudgingly went back to training. Both were unmotivated. It seemed that they had to suffer this for 2 weeks. They all secretly greeted Tong Yi in their hearts. Tong Yi was aware of the players' private grumbling. But he didn't pay much attention or say anything. After all, the training was brutal, and it was normal for them to vent a little. If they weren't allowed to complain, they'd probably explode. None of that mattered, as long as they took the training seriously. He stood on the sidelines and watched them work. They were all giving it their best, completing the drills with quality and intensity. Just yesterday, Campbell, Senderos, Matic and Vardy had joined the team after passing their physicals and were officially members of Munich 1860. They started the grueling physical training today. To be honest, Tong Yi had warned them the training would be tough, so they'd mentally prepared themselves. But after their first session, they realized it was even harder than they'd imagined. The veteran Campbell was struggling to keep up. He was in decent shape, but even he was nearing his limit. However, Tong Yi had spoken with him before training. Tong Yi told him that this physical training was especially important for older players. By investing more effort in building up their endurance, they could maintain their form longer in matches and have more opportunities to play. Campbell could tell Tong Yi valued him, so he grit his teeth and pushed himself. Naturally, Senderos, Matic, and the others didn't question Tong Yi and trained hard, and Vardy would do whatever Tong Yi asked him to do meticulously. This opportunity was too precious for him to mess up. Watching the players train with such dedication, Tong Yi felt satisfied. Just then, his phone rang. It was Bruns, his head coach. Tong Yi answered and asked, Michelle, how's it going over there? Bruns replied, no problem with Hammond. He's agreed to return to Germany for another season or 2. However, he has a request. Tong Yi said, he wants to join the coaching staff, right? Bruns was surprised and said, you knew that? Tong Yi said, I heard he'd been thinking about it since his time at Manchester City, and he's been studying with their coaching staff. It's clear he's planning to become a coach after he retires. Bruns asked, did that Chinese player at Manchester City tell you this before? Tong Yi knew that Bruns was talking about Sun Qingjiang, but he really didn't get it from here. There was information about Hamann in his memory. Dietmar Hamann, a German defensive midfielder, has played for Bayern Munich and Liverpool and other giants. The peak of his career was also in Liverpool, where he participated in the much-talked-about Istanbul Miracle and won the Champions League. Now he is a player of Manchester City, but his contract with Manchester City has expired. In Tong Yi's memory, Hamann was unemployed at home for a season before going to Milton Keynes to become a player coach. Although Hamann has reached the end of his career, in Tong Yi's opinion, he still has the strength and can still play in the Bundesliga too. Moreover, Hamann's experience and ability can help Matic improve quickly. Moreover, it will cost nothing to introduce him as a free transfer, and his annual salary will not be too high. Therefore, bringing in Hamann is a very good decision, Tong Yi said. Yes. Bruns asked, so, do we agree to his request? Tong Yi immediately said, offer it to him and get him to Munich ASAP to sign the contract and join the preseason physical training. Let's not waste any time. Got it, Bruns said. Tong Yi asked, what about Edgar Davids? Tong Yi also had his eye on the Dutch legend Davids. Davis's contract also expires this summer and he is exempt from signing. Moreover, Davis's current strength is quite good, and he can play in the Bundesliga second division with ease. Therefore, he also wants to introduce the Dutch. Bruns replied, Davids is asking for an annual salary of £4 million. That's outrageous. I don't think he's serious about coming to Munich 1860 at all. Tong Yi frowned, feeling annoyed. The Dutchman was being greedy. Truthfully, he really wanted to sign Davids. But the player's salary demands were too high, so Tong Yi decided to pass. Tong Yi said, forget it. Don't waste any more time on him. How about Walker? Do we have a shot? Bruns knew how much Tong Yi valued Walker and had focused all his efforts on this deal while in England. He said, it's still difficult. Tottenham prefers to loan him back to Sheffield United, and the player himself prefers Sheffield United. Tong Yi frowned slightly, feeling a sense of foreboding. Was Munich 1860 going to miss out on Walker? 024, finalize the team's future right back. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. To be honest, Tong Yi's a big fan of Kyle Walker. Walker was potentially England's best right back for the next decade. He's got it all: strength, speed, aggression, and the ability to impact the game on both ends of the field. A complete right back. Later on, Walker even evolved beyond the traditional fullback role, playing more like a midfielder. When the team's attacking, he wasn't just stuck on the wing. He'd drift into the center to link up with teammates, deliver killer through balls, and spray long passes to switch the point of attack. Later on, England saw another right back with a similar style, Liverpool's Alexander-Arnold. These two really redefined what a fullback could do. Sure, Walker is raw right now, nowhere near as polished as he'd become later. But even at this stage, he's good enough to be Munich 1860 starting right back and a real asset to the team. He's just starting to break out now. Tong Yi remembers this being the season Tottenham loaned Walker back to Sheffield United, where he became a key player. After a couple of games back at Tottenham, he was loaned out to Queen's Park Rangers, also in the Championship, where he was again a regular starter. Then, after half a season at QPR, he went to Aston Villa in the Premier League, becoming a starter there and showing he could handle the top flight. That's why Tong Yi's convinced Walker's ready for the Bundesliga. Getting Walker to Munich in 1860 would be perfect, especially since it's just a loan, so the cost is minimal. Tong Yi really wants this deal to happen, but Bruns says there's a snag: Walker's unlikely to come. Tong Yi felt a wave of anxiety. He's stuck here, unable to go to England. And that's frustrating him. He's not giving up that easily, though. Tong Yi turned to Bruns. Do you have Redknapp's number? That's right. Tong Yi wants to go straight to Harry Redknapp, Tottenham's head coach, and try to convince him. Redknapp took over Tottenham last October when they were dead last in the Premier League. Within 2 weeks, he'd beaten Bolton, Liverpool, and Manchester City, and snatched a 4-4 draw with Arsenal, dragging the team out of the relegation zone. Last season, he took them from the bottom to 8th place. Tottenham fans are totally behind him, completely confident in his leadership, and right after leading the team's revival, he swooped in and signed Walker, fresh from the England U19 squad. He clearly rates Walker highly and has big plans for him, but it's also clear he thinks Walker is too young and inexperienced for the Premier League right now. That's why he's looking to loan him out to get some experience. Walker needs playing time, and Redknapp is willing to give him that chance. Bruns said, yeah, I'll grab it for you. Bruns got him Redknapp's number, and Tong Yi dialed it immediately. Redknapp's in his office, working on pre-season signings. The team doesn't need a major overhaul, just some tweaks. He's got his eye on Peter Crouch, the tall striker who used to play for Liverpool. Crouch could fill the gap left by Berbatov. He's about to call Portsmouth about Crouch when his phone rings. He picks it up, sees it's an unknown number, and frowns. Still, he answers. Hello, who's this? Tong Yi jumps right in. Hello, Mr. Redknapp, this is Tong Yi, head coach of Munich 1860. Sorry to bother you, but I wanted to talk to you about Kyle Walker. Redknapp remembers Munich 1860 recently inquiring about a loan for Walker. He replies, hello, Coach Tong Yi. I think we turned down your club's request. Tong Yi says, yes. But I still believe Munich 1860 is the best place for Walker right now. Redknapp shakes his head. No, no, no. I'm a big believer in Kyle, and I have high hopes for his future. He's going to play in the Premier League, so I don't want him going abroad. The championship is the best fit for him right now. Tong Yi was right. Redknapp wants Walker to stay in England to develop, so when he's ready for Tottenham, he won't have to adapt to the English game. Tong Yi counters, that makes sense, but can you guarantee he'll get enough playing time in the championship? Have they given you that kind of assurance? Redknapp pauses. Not even Walker's old club, Sheffield United, has promised him regular minutes. Redknapp says, they haven't, but I trust Kyle's ability. Tong Yi smirks. Mr. Redknapp, I'm also a big believer in Kyle, and I expect big things from him. But what he needs now is playing time, lots of it. And I can guarantee that. If Walker joins my team, as long as he's fit and performing, he'll be Munich 1860 starting right back. He'll play every game all season long. Redknapp's taken aback. He didn't expect Tong Yi to be so high on Walker, willing to guarantee him a starting spot. If that's the case, Munich 1860 might be a good option. He asks, can you really guarantee Kyle starts? Tong Yi is relieved. He's getting through to Redknapp, he replies, absolutely. We can put it in the contract. Redknapp is surprised by the offer, impressed by Tong Yi's boldness. He can see Tong Yi really believes in Walker, he says, you really rate Walker that highly? Tong Yi answers, definitely. I'd even like to loan Walker for 2 or 3 years, ideally 3. He'll be a key player for us during that time, and I'm happy to put that in the contract, too. Wow. Redknapp takes a breath. This kid's got guts. But he's getting ahead of himself. There's no way they'd loan Walker out for 3 years. Frankly, Redknapp doesn't see Walker breaking into the Tottenham team for at least a couple of years. But with his potential, he should be Premier League ready in 3. He'd planned to loan Walker out for the next 2 years anyway, to get him ready. If Walker can find a stable environment and get plenty of chances to play during that time, it would be great for his development. But his worry is Walker playing in Germany. Even if he improves, will he be able to adjust to the Premier League style? That's what's bothering him. Tong Yi senses Redknapp's hesitation and says quickly, the standard of the 2. Bundesliga is high, almost on par with the championship. The intensity is similar. So there's not much difference between the 2 leagues. More importantly, we can stay in touch. I'll send you regular reports on Walker's performance and training, and you can offer guidance. We both want the same thing, for Walker to develop the right way. Honestly, Tong Yi's last point really got to Redknapp. He could tell Tong Yi truly admired Walker. He replied, well, I have to say you've convinced me. Congratulations, young man. Walker is yours. But not for 3 years, 2 at most. Tong Yi finally relaxes and feels a surge of excitement. He's got Walker. 3 years would have been ideal, but 2 is great, too. Tong Yi's more than happy. Tong Yi says, you won't regret this decision. I hope not, Redknapp replies. Tong Yi doesn't waste any more time with pleasantries. He calls Walker directly to persuade him. Sheffield United is Walker's old club. He's played there since he was a kid and has a strong connection to it. It's likely his first choice, so Tong Yi needs to sway him. Convincing Walker turns out to be easier than expected. When Tong Yi says Walker will be Munich 1860 starting right back for the next 2 years and will get plenty of playing time, Walker agrees immediately. Tong Yi surprised. He finds out Redknapp had already discussed it with Walker, which is why he was so willing. Tong Yi has to give Redknapp props. After talking to Walker, Tong Yi sends Bruns to finalize the deal and tells him to get it done quickly. He wants Walker to join the team as soon as possible to catch up on pre-season fitness work. Bruns promises to take care of it. He's impressed by how quickly Tong Yi handled everything. Clearly, Tong Yi knows his stuff. With the Walker deal sorted, Tong Yi feels a weight lifted. But he knows the recruiting can't stop here. He needs to move fast. both to get the new players up to speed for the season and to beat other teams to the players he wants. That's why Tong Yi is heading to Spain. He's got his eye on some players there and needs to act fast before someone else snatches them. But before Spain, Tong Yi's going to call Martina to apologize. He's been back in Germany for days and hasn't even seen her. That's not right. Turns out Martina's not even in Germany. She's at a fashion event in Milan and will be staying there for a while. After a quick chat with Martina and a few words with Pintus and the others, Tong Yi flies to Spain. 025, secure the future of third place in the Ballon d'Or list. You are listening at NovelsThe. Jacob, a burly guy with a beard and a gut, squinted at the cafe's second floor. You sure about this? They're really up there. That the cafe was a hole in the wall, tucked away in the boonies. Jacob wouldn't have known it existed if the shaggy character in front of him hadn't pointed it out. Jacob glanced at the frizzy-haired informant again. Frizzy, as he called him, was bundled up in an oversized windbreaker and a top hat, trying to be inconspicuous. But his trademark pompadour gave him away every time. Jacob almost told him to ditch the do if he wanted to be a good spy. But he figured, what the heck, let Frizzy play his games. Frizzy, after glancing around to make sure no one was listening, whispered, when's my info ever wrong? Relax, I've checked everything out. Jacob grunted. The guy was a weirdo, but his intel was always solid. That's why Jacob still put up with him. Alright, I trust you, Jacob conceded. He turned back to the cafe where Damon was holed up, and frowned. He'd already tried to get in. This wasn't your average coffee shop. It was a private club for members only. The bouncer had turned him away flat. The fact that it was so exclusive was what made Jacob trust Frizzy's information. This place was perfect for a secret meeting. Now that he knew his target was inside, he needed a way in. He turned to Frizzy. Got any ideas on how I can get in there? Frizzy shook his head. Getting inside is tough, but if you just want some pictures, I might be able to help. Jacob's eyes lit up. Seriously? How? Frizzy grinned and held out his hand, palm up. Jacob's face darkened. Was this guy always looking for a handout? Didn't I just pay you last week? He snapped. Frizzy said calmly, that was last week. This is a new job. Jacob's temples throbbed. He was fuming, but what could he do? He needed those photos. Grumbling, Jacob pulled a thick brown envelope from his backpack and slapped it into Frizzy's outstretched hand. Alright, now talk. Frizzy hefted the envelope, a satisfied look on his face. He pointed to a small building across the street from the cafe. See that place? The roof's easy to get on. You should be able to get a clear shot of the second floor from there. Jacob looked where Frizzy was pointing. The building was positioned perfectly. He should be able to see the second floor of the cafe. But could he really get the pictures he needed? He still had his doubts. He glared at Frizzy. You sure it'll work? Frizzy nodded confidently. Positive. I already checked it out myself. Jacob perked up. He bolted across the street, scaled the building, and peeked through the window on the second floor of the cafe. There were people in there. He couldn't make out who they were with the naked eye, but he wasn't worried. He'd come prepared. He pulled out his professional camera, adjusted the focus, and peered through the lens. Bingo! He saw exactly what he was hoping for. He grinned. It was Munich 1860's general manager, Stoff's, meeting with Ewald Ning, the out-of-work German coach. So, Munich 1860 was planning to replace their current coach with Ning. Jacob started snapping photos like crazy, the flash lighting up the room. Back on the ground, Jacob was still buzzing. He glanced at his camera and smirked. Tong Yi, you're toast. Frizzy sauntered over. Get your pictures. Jacob still thought Frizzy was a greedy little weasel, but he had to admit the guy was reliable. He figured they'd be working together again in the future. Jacob nodded. Got M. Frizzy gave a curt nod. Then I'm out of here. Jacob added, yeah, but if you hear anything else, be sure to give me a call. Frizzy winked. Don't worry. Money talks. I'll be in touch, and with that, Frizzy vanished. Jacob spun around and headed back to his office. He couldn't wait to break this story and hit Tong Yi where it hurt. Meanwhile, Tong Yi was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing back in Germany. He was focused on his mission in Spain. This trip was crucial, and he needed to move fast. First stop, San Sebastian in the Basque Country. He was there to find Antoine Griezmann, who was playing for Real Sociedad's B team. Yep, the same Griezmann who would later dominate for Atletico Madrid and Barcelona, the French forward who finished third in the 2016 Ballon d'Or voting. Griezmann was one of Tong Yi's favorite strikers, and a player he was determined to sign. Tong Yi knew that Griezmann had just turned 18 in March. He'd been promoted from Real Sociedad's youth team that summer and was now on the B team. He was still under a youth contract. His first professional contract wouldn't be signed until April of the following year, at which point his release clause would skyrocket to €30 million. Right now, Griezmann was a steal. Since Griezmann hadn't signed a professional contract with Real Sociedad, Tong Yi could theoretically snatch him up for free. Real Sociedad valued Griezmann, but only within the youth setup. Tong Yi figured it would be easy to lure him away at this stage. But if he waited even a couple of weeks, the situation could change dramatically. Tong Yi remembered that Real Sociedad had been hit with a wave of injuries just before the start of the La Liga season. The first-team coach, Martin Lasarte, was facing a shortage of players, so he called up Griezmann from the B team. Griezmann wasn't the only B team player brought up to the first team, but he was the one who seized the opportunity. Griezmann scored in his first warm-up match and kept scoring. Lasarte took notice. Griezmann went on to play well in the Spanish second division and earned his first professional contract the following April. He played 39 games for Real Sociedad that season, scoring 6 goals and cementing his place as the team's starting forward. Tong Yi had to find Griezmann and convince him to join Munich 1860 ASAP. Otherwise, he'd miss his chance. Tong Yi tracked down Griezmann and his father and laid out his offer. To be honest, Griezmann and his dad were shocked. They didn't expect to get an offer from a foreign team so early in his career, but they were definitely intrigued. Tong Yi promised that Griezmann would be a starting winger for Munich 1860. That was too good to pass up. It was the German second division. After all, if he stayed with Real Sociedad, he'd be stuck on the B team, playing in the Spanish third division. That was a huge step down. Griezmann desperately wanted to play in the second division. But getting into Real Sociedad's first team wasn't easy. Even if they rated him, it could be a year or two before he got his shot, so, Griezmann was pumped about Tong Yi's invitation. Griezmann's father nodded his approval. Griezmann locked eyes with Tong Yi and asked, "Coach, are you really guaranteeing I'll start?" Tong Yi nodded firmly. "As long as you're healthy and in good form, you'll be a starter for Munich 1860. Griezmann couldn't contain his excitement. He nodded enthusiastically and said, "Then I'm in. I want to go to Munich 1860, Tong Yi beamed. "Great. Welcome aboard, Antoine." Griezmann thanked him profusely, and his father added, "We're leaving Anthony in your care. Please look after him." Tong Yi assured him, "Don't worry, we'll take good care of him." After working out the details with Griezmann, Tong Yi approached Real Sociedad about signing him. They weren't happy about it. They had high hopes for Griezmann. But they found out that Tong Yi had already agreed to a contract with Griezmann, so their hands were tied. They hadn't signed Griezmann to a professional contract yet, just a youth agreement. A youth agreement was worthless. Real Sociedad was kicking themselves. Why hadn't they locked Griezmann down sooner? Now they were about to lose a player they'd developed for next to nothing. Since there was no professional contract in place, Real Sociedad couldn't demand a big transfer fee. They knew Tong Yi could walk away with Griezmann for free, but they still tried to squeeze him for €1.5 million. Tong Yi wasn't stupid. He wasn't about to get ripped off. If he wasn't worried about causing trouble down the line, he would have taken Griezmann without paying a dime. After all, Manchester United had poached Pogba from Le Havre for free, and Le Havre had sued FIFA. Manchester United had won the lawsuit, but it was still a major headache, so Tong Yi negotiated with Real Sociedad and agreed to pay a small training fee to take Griezmann. Real Sociedad got robbed, but they had no choice but to watch Griezmann leave for peanuts. Tong Yi was thrilled. He gave Griezmann 2 days to rest before flying back to Germany to join Munich 1860. But Tong Yi wasn't resting. He immediately headed to Madrid, the Spanish capital, to scout for more players. 026, a profitable trip to Spain. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Yes, Tong Yi headed to Madrid ASAP. The players he was after weren't from Real Madrid, the glitzy Galacticos, but from their cross-down rivals, Atletico Madrid. Of course, he wasn't targeting Atletico's stars like Forlan or Agüero. He knew Agüero was a stud, but Munich 1860 just couldn't afford him right now. Tong Yi had his eye on 2 guys, David De Gea from Atletico's youth squad, and a fringe player bouncing around the first team. This guy, Diego Costa, had been with Atletico since 2007 but was constantly being loaned out the past 2 years. Yep, Tong Yi was focused on these 2, they were crucial to his plans, especially De Gea. Right now, Munich 1860 only had 2 goalies. Hoffmann was the team captain and former starter, but he was getting old and had been plagued by injuries. He was too unreliable to be the main guy anymore. Jonah was young and decent enough for Bundesliga 2, but his potential was limited. De Gea was already on another level. This season was when De Gea started to break out. From what Tong Yi remembered, De Gea was Atletico's 3rd goalie this season. He only got his shot on September 30th when the starting goalie got hurt. And he made the most of it. He played 18 games, snagged man of the match twice, and helped Atletico win the UEFA Cup. The next season, he naturally took over as the starting keeper. After that, he exploded, becoming one of the best in Spain. A few years later, he transferred to Manchester United for a cool £18.9 million, and then made his run at becoming the world's top goalie. De Gea was on the verge of stardom, but Tong Yi knew he was in a tough spot. Atletico Madrid wasn't giving him much love at the moment. He had just signed his first pro contract the year before, but getting into the first team seemed impossible. Atletico had just dropped €5 million on Spain's hottest young keeper, Serginho Asenjo. When Asenjo was called up from Valladolid B to help the first team after Bittler and Alberto both played poorly last season, he became the team's main goalie, and he played very well. At just 19 years old, he became the youngest starting goalie in La Liga. After the season he won the Golden Ball award for the goalkeeper position, was selected into the La Liga season's best rookie team, and was selected as one of the top 100 rising stars, putting him in the company of players like Sergio Agüero, Messi and Cesc Fabregas. Signing Asenjo was a major blow to De Gea. Keep in mind Asenjo was only a year older. Atletico's brass clearly favored Asenjo. It looked like the starting job was his to lose, so it seemed unlikely De Gea would stick around. You can imagine how frustrating it must have been for him. To make matters worse, Atletico's sporting director, Jesus Garcia Pichichi, tried to send him to Numancia in the Spanish second division, but De Gea turned them down. Queen's Park Rangers also put in a request to loan De Gea, but he rejected that too. He was determined to put in the extra work to improve, break into the first team on his own merits, and prove everyone wrong. Atletico manager Abel Rosino took notice and promoted him to third-string goalie. Which meant he was still behind Asenjo. If Asenjo hadn't left to attend the U20 World Youth Championship in September, De Gea wouldn't have been promoted to second goalie, and if the main goalie hadn't had a serious injury, De Gea would still be sitting on the bench. Luckily for Tong Yi, Asenjo hadn't yet decided to attend the U20 World Youth Championship, and De Gea had just left the youth team to join the first team, so he was still Atletico Madrid's third goalkeeper. Now was the time for Tong Yi to pounce. He was confident he could land De Gea. Looking at the skinny kid in front of him, Tong Yi said, "David, Munich 1860 really wants you. We need you." De Gea was taken aback by the young Chinese guy in front of him. He couldn't believe someone so young was coaching a team in the German second division. He was happy to be wanted, but he still had to say no. "I appreciate the offer, coach, but I can't leave Atletico Madrid. I've been a fan since I was a kid. I've been in their youth system since I was 10. My goal has always been to play for Atletico Madrid." Tong Yi shot back, "Even if it means being the third-string goalie, De Gea paused, looking confused. After a moment, he replied, I have faith in myself. I won't be third string forever. Tong Yi said, I believe in your ability, too, but the Atletico brass doesn't see it that way. They're higher on Asenjo, no matter what. And Asenjo's only a year older than you. Do you want to spend your career as his backup? De Gea didn't want to believe it. But deep down, he knew Tong Yi was right. He knew what the sporting director and manager thought. They clearly favored Asenjo, and the director was even trying to get rid of him. De Gea was hurting, he loved Atletico and didn't want to go. But for his career, leaving was probably the smart move. Seeing his hesitation, Tong Yi pressed on, I hear that Pitachi, the sporting director, wants you gone, right? He's been shopping you around. De Gea nodded, even more dejected. Tong Yi felt bad for him. That's their loss. I think you're amazing. I have total faith in you. Come join my team. Munich 1860 would be lucky to have you. De Gea looked up at Tong Yi. No offense, but even if I did leave, Munich 1860 wouldn't be my first choice, would it? Tong Yi wasn't offended. He was actually pleased. He sensed De Gea was starting to come around. Time to turn up the heat. I know Pitachi's been talking to teams, and I'm sure you have other options. But Munich 1860 is the best fit for you. De Gea was skeptical. Wigan Athletic from the Premier League made me a permanent transfer offer. You really think you can compete with that? Tong Yi replied confidently, absolutely. De Gea was baffled. Where was this confidence coming from? How could a second-division German team be better than a Premier League squad? Tong Yi explained, Premier League teams are tempting, I get it. But can they guarantee you the starting job? You'll just end up on the bench at Wigan. De Gea's eyes widened. You mean you'd let me start? Seeing his reaction, Tong Yi knew he had him hooked. Yes. Come to Munich 1860, and the starting spot is yours. De Gea's heart pounded. His mind raced. He couldn't believe Tong Yi was so confident in him, offering him the starting job outright. This was the German second division, not some low-level league, but being a starter in Bundesliga 2 was a whole lot better than rotting on the bench. Even if Asenjo was away at the World Youth Championship with Spain U21 at the start of the new season, that meant De Gea would be Atletico's second goalkeeper until October. But after Asenjo's return, would he become the third goalkeeper and sit on the bench again? It was better to start at 1860 Munich than sit on the bench at Atletico Madrid. For now, playing time was what mattered most. De Gea looked Tong Yi dead in the eye. Coach David, can you really guarantee me that starting spot? Tong Yi said solemnly, I can't promise you anything else. But as long as I'm here, you'll be my starting goalie. De Gea was overcome with excitement and gratitude. This guy understood him. He believed in him. He couldn't let him down. I'm in. I'll join Munich 1860. Yes. He had landed De Gea. De Gea's value was dirt cheap at the moment. He was fresh out of the youth system and just joining the first team, worth maybe €100,000. Compared to the £18.9 million he'd be worth in a few years, this was practically a steal. Tong Yi immediately reached out to Pitachi, the Atletico Madrid sporting director who was determined to unload De Gea. Dealing with him meant getting the best possible price, even though De Gea was worth only €100,000. €100,000 certainly cannot buy De Gea. After some haggling, Munich 1860 snagged both David De Gea and Diego Costa for €1.5 million. Costa's situation was simpler. He had transferred from Braga in the Portuguese Super League 2 years ago for €1.5 million. He'd been playing on loan in the Spanish second division and hadn't exactly set the world on fire, so his value had fluctuated. It was clear Atletico Madrid wasn't too interested in him, but they still wanted a buyback clause, giving them the option to repurchase Costa for €1 million in 3 years. Originally, Atletico Madrid did not set an annual salary, but had a buyback clause. In other words, as long as they want to, they can force Costa back for €1 million after half a season. Tong Yi was naturally unwilling. He was very optimistic about Costa and naturally hopes to buy it out. On the one hand, Munich 1860 really has no money, and on the other hand, Atletico Madrid really can't bear to part with Costa. Therefore, after discussion, Tong Yi set a 3-year limit, which meant Atletico could force a repurchase for €1 million after 3 years. Honestly, Tong Yi knew Costa would be worth way more than $1.5 million in 3 years. But he didn't have the cash to spend now, and he couldn't change Atletico's mind. He had to settle for the next best thing and agree. In reality, Tong Yi wasn't losing anything. He was just paying $500,000 for Costa to play for him for 3 years. The players were happy and signed on the dotted line. Tong Yi was thrilled with his trip to Spain, but when he got back to Germany, all that happiness went out the window. Every German media outlet was reporting that Munich 1860 was about to fire him and replace him with Ning. Munich fans were practically throwing a party, celebrating the news that the soft-boiled newbie was finally out and that dawn was breaking for Munich 1860. 027, you will be fired from the team soon. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. What were you thinking? I told you to be careful. Baker snapped, clearly furious at Stoffels. I was careful, Stoffels retorted, sounding put out. Baker was incredulous. Careful? And the whole world knows about it. Stoffels tried to defend himself. I really was. We met at that private cafe. No one should have known about it, and reporters can't normally get in. But he was genuinely baffled about how the reporter had gotten the photos. He was so innocent. Baker, seeing Stoffels's distress, couldn't keep berating him. He had a splitting headache. The news being public wasn't good for the team, not at all. After a moment of thought, Baker said, just be more careful in the future. Stoffels immediately nodded. Understood, Mr. Chairman. Should we still contact Ning? Let's hold off for now, Baker said, to let things cool down. Before Stoffels could reply, a rapid knock echoed on the door. Both men turned, surprised. Who was being so rude? Who is it? Baker called out. Come in. The door flew open and a very angry Tong Yi stormed in. He marched up to Baker's desk, glaring at Stoffels, and slapped a newspaper down in front of him. Mr. Chairman, he said, trying to keep his voice even, what's going on here? Is the club planning to fire me? To be honest, the reports had made him see red, not at the reporters, but at the club's management and Stoffels. Even if they didn't like him, they didn't need to be in such a hurry to find a replacement, right? And fine, look if you want, but why make it such a public spectacle? Did they want to see Munich 1860 crash and burn? To cause this much chaos, to make the players uneasy, to create trouble for the team, even in a difficult time? Tong Yi couldn't see how this would benefit anyone. Baker knew they'd screwed up. David, he said immediately, we have no intention of replacing you right now. You'll definitely be the head coach of Munich 1860 for at least the next 3 months. And it was true, they really weren't planning on firing him. Firing Tong Yi would mean paying him a severance, which wasn't worth it. Tong Yi glanced at Stoffels again, then pointed at the newspaper. Then what's this all about? Baker, sensing Tong Yi's anger toward Stoffels, quickly stepped in. Manfred, why don't you go take care of things downstairs? Stoffels nodded slightly, said goodbye to Baker, and slipped out of the office, closing the door behind him. Baker motioned for Tong Yi to sit down and then said, it is my intention to contact Ning, but you have to understand where I'm coming from. It's not that I don't trust you, but we need to be prepared for the future. So, Baker didn't believe in him either. Tong Yi thought about it, there was some sense to Baker's actions. After all, if his performance was truly terrible and he was fired, finding a replacement would take time, which wouldn't be good for the team. Seeing Tong Yi's expression, Baker continued, look, you're Martina's boyfriend, so I'm definitely on your side. But you also have to understand my situation. I'm under a lot of pressure. You know, Munich 1860 isn't my personal playground, I'm just the team chairman hired by the bank. Tong Yi knew that. Baker added, hiring you as head coach put me under a lot of heat. The media and fans are increasingly opposed to it. My superiors already have strong opinions. You get it. By this point, Tong Yi's initial anger had subsided. He could feel the pressure Baker was under, partly for him, and partly for his niece. There was nothing wrong with people doing this now, Tong Yi nodded. I understand. And thank you. Baker looked at him. As long as you understand. Tong Yi said, I don't object to you contacting Ning or other coaches privately. But can you not make such a big production and make it known to the world? It's extremely detrimental to the team and unsettles the players. It could even cause chaos. That was what really pissed Tong Yi off, Baker said. On that point, I want to apologize. We originally intended to contact Ning privately, and we were being careful. But those reporters are everywhere. We just got unlucky. Tong Yi believed Baker was being sincere, but he didn't buy the bad luck story. I don't think it's a coincidence, Tong Yi said. This isn't simple. Stoffis isn't a rookie, he's been in this business for a long time. He couldn't be that careless. Come on, Baker frowned, surprised. You think Stoffis? Baker wasn't stupid. He'd had his own doubts about Stoffis, but he couldn't see a motive and didn't want to believe it. Tong Yi said, forget it. There's no point digging into it now. I just hope this doesn't happen again. What the team needs is a quiet and stable environment. I hope it's not causing any more problems for the team. Baker said immediately, don't worry, it won't. And I promise you, no matter what, you'll be the head coach of Munich 1860 for the next 3 months. You have the final say on team affairs. You have my full support. Tong Yi nodded firmly, feeling grateful. He knew Baker was doing it all for Martina. But it really helped him, and Baker was taking a lot of heat. Tong Yi said, thank you. Baker shook his head. But if you don't deliver in 3 months, I'm sorry, I'll fire you without hesitation. Understood, Tong Yi said. Then get back to the team, Baker said. They need you to keep things steady. Tong Yi nodded slightly, stood up, and left. This situation was dangerous for both Tong Yi and Munich 1860, the media buzz was deafening, as if the coaching change was already a done deal. Naturally, this made the players uneasy, especially those Tong Yi had brought in. If Tong Yi was fired, what would happen to them? These players had already started worrying about their futures, and they were sleepwalking through training. Many of the original players had always resented Tong Yi. The crazy physical training had pushed them over the edge, and now with the rumors of Tong Yi's dismissal, they were overjoyed and had even stopped training properly. Little Hoffman had been against Tong Yi from the start, even hostile. He couldn't understand why the team would hire such a young Chinese guy to coach. He thought the management had lost their minds. When he found out that Tong Yi was just riding his girlfriend's coattails, he looked down on him even more, but now, Tong Yi had forced them to do grueling physical conditioning every day. Little Hoffman had cursed him hundreds of times in his head, he just couldn't accept Tong Yi. He thought he was useless and didn't know anything. Now that Tong Yi was finally leaving, he felt like dawn had broken for Munich 1860, he immediately said to Big Hoffman and the others, see? I told you, this guy Tong Yi doesn't know anything. What's he got besides a hot girlfriend? He's just a pretty boy. I told you this physical training was useless, it's complete nonsense and just making us suffer. Listening to Little Hoffman's words, Big Hoffman and the others looked unhappy. That damn physical training was especially rough on veterans like them. They felt like they were being run into the ground. And what else had Tong Yi done since he joined the team? Nothing. They all thought he was a fool who didn't know anything. They were angry at Tong Yi too, and they didn't think he was helping them with the physical training. Little Hoffman continued, I don't care what you guys think, I'm not doing any more of this bullshit physical training. Can you win by just being in good shape? Get real. Just being physically fit doesn't cut it. Tong Yi's an idiot, he doesn't know anything about football. I'm done. With that, Little Hoffman stopped and walked off to the side to rest. Pintus frowned, looking furious. Little Hoffman was disrespecting them. Where do you think you're going? Pinto said coldly. Training's not over yet. Little Hoffman retorted, just as coldly, whoever wants to train can train. I'm not messing around here anymore. Tell me, which team wins championships just by being physically fit? All you're doing is running us into the ground. I have to think about my own body, I don't want you to ruin me. The players and coaches on the training ground stared at Hoffman. They couldn't believe he was openly defying the coaching staff. Did he want to be kicked off the team? Suddenly, the atmosphere turned icy. Tong Yi's voice, cold as ice, came from behind little Hoffman. Go back to training now, and I'll pretend this never happened. Little Hoffman turned around, surprised and a little nervous to see Tong Yi, but he quickly puffed himself up and said, You're just a kept man who knows nothing about football. Why should I listen to you? I'm not stupid enough to let you destroy my body. Tong Yi hadn't expected little Hoffman to be so foolish. He almost thought the guy was mentally unstable. He said coldly, If you don't go back, there won't be a place for you on the team next season. Little Hoffman sneered, looking down on Tong Yi. You should just shut your mouth. How long do you think you can stay at Munich 1860 because of your girlfriend? You'll be out soon enough. Mr. Ning will be the head coach of our team any day now. 028, it's dawn. You are listening at NovelsThe.audio. Tong Yi fixed his gaze on the somewhat cocky little Hoffman and said coolly, You don't want to practice? Fine. You're off the team. Hit the road. Big Hoffman, unable to stand it, immediately stepped forward, pleading, David. Tong Yi cut him off, You want to join him? Big Hoffman froze, and fell silent. Little Hoffman, already anticipating this outcome, was still furious. He glared at Tong Yi, eyes blazing like an angry lion, and spat, Don't get cocky, kid. You're going down. Munich 1860 isn't your personal piggy bank, or a toy to play with. You'll get what's coming to you, you spineless jerk. Tong Yi responded icily, As long as I'm the head coach of Munich 1860, you're not seeing the first team. Get out. Little Hoffman glared at Tong Yi, his eyes practically spitting fire. He said, each word dripping with venom, You'll regret this. Then, he turned on his heel and stormed off. The elder Hoffman started to follow, to talk to his son, but a look from Tong Yi stopped him cold. Turning to the remaining players, Tong Yi announced, Since you're all here, I've got something to say. They looked up at Tong Yi, a mix of worry, confusion, and fear on their faces. Tong Yi surveyed their expressions and continued, Here's the deal, I, Tong Yi, am the head coach of Munich 1860, at least for the next 3 months. So, ditch any crazy ideas you might have, or you'll end up like him, gone from the team. We don't need any rebels. The players listened intently, their faces still a study in apprehension. However, the players Tong Yi had brought in visibly relaxed. The recent news that Munich 1860 was about to replace him, that Tong Yi was on his way out, had them seriously worried about their futures. After all, they were his guys. If he was fired, where would that leave them? New coach, new rules. Knowing he had at least 3 months gave them some breathing room, but a flicker of anxiety still lingered. Tong Yi pressed on, Of course, if Munich 1860 is sitting at the top of the Bundesliga in 3 months, then I'll be your head coach for the next 3 years. So, relax, don't panic. Just focus on the training plan our coaching staff puts together, work together as a team, and what you're worrying about won't happen. We'll take Munich 1860 to the top of the Bundesliga, guaranteed. Big Hoffman and others snickered inwardly. They thought Tong Yi was delusional, plain crazy. Did he really think the German second division was a walk in the park? At that moment, they were in total agreement with little Hoffman. Tong Yi wouldn't last. The players Tong Yi had recruited felt a wave of relief. Reaching the top of the league in 3 months would be a tough climb, but not impossible. They needed these opportunities, and they silently vowed to give it their all, to keep Tong Yi in charge, to keep their own chances alive. Tong Yi added, Some of you might think I'm pushing you this hard just to save my own skin. And you're right, but that's not all there is to it. You should all know that a new coach isn't going to play guys who dog it or screw around, let alone go against him. I'm not just blowing smoke here. The players straightened up, realizing there was a ring of truth to what Tong Yi was saying. Tong Yi went on, the better you play on the field, the more you get. Your value goes up, your salary goes up. But if you play like crap out there, who's going to pay good money for you? Many players nodded, their expressions now serious. Tong Yi concluded, so train hard, not for me, but for yourselves. This physical training is brutal, yeah, but it's going to make you better, period. With that, Tong Yi stopped talking and signaled Pintus to get the players back to work. Just as Pintus was leading the team away, Tong Yi called out to his guys, Sol, Nemanja, David, you guys be ready to roll with me around noon tomorrow. We're having a press conference to introduce you to the fans. Campbell and the others nodded, acknowledging the plan. Tong Yi waved his hand, dismissing them to training. He stood by the field like a statue, watching the players work. A large group of Munich 1860 fans were packed into a fan bar deep in Green Forest Street, not far from the training ground. Most were members of the Blue Lion fan club. They gathered, waving banners, singing and dancing like crazy, celebrating a team victory. Meyer, the director of the Blue Lion fan club, stood in the middle of the crowd, waving his hands to quiet them down. The fans went silent and looked at Meyer. Meyer shouted, men and women, brothers and comrades, we finally beat the devil. We defeated corruption. The suits at Munich 1860 caved, and that guy Baker finally fired his niece's husband. That spineless fan Nan is getting the boot. Munich 1860 is about to welcome a local hero, Ning. The sun is finally shining on Munich 1860, the fans erupted in cheers, jumping up and down. They were ecstatic. Meyer held up a newspaper, pointing to a photo of Staffs and Ning meeting, and cried, that's him. Ewald Ning is about to become our head coach. We're getting back on track. We're going for the Bundesliga title again. Long live! Long live Ning, long live Munich 1860, the fans cheered, shouting, long live, the atmosphere was electric. They were jumping and screaming like maniacs. The dark cloud over their heads had finally lifted. Meyer continued, this isn't fake news. I got inside info from the top brass at Munich 1860. They've already initialed the agreement with Ning, just a matter of days. That Chinese wimp is finally getting canned. Today is a great day. Suddenly, a woman in the crowd exclaimed, is it tomorrow? I just saw a post on the official Munich 1860 website. The team's holding a press conference tomorrow and inviting all the major media. Meyer's eyes lit up, and he went to the woman. He looked at her phone. Sure enough, the Munich 1860 official website had announced a press conference for the next day. Meyer was ecstatic, shouting, brothers and sisters, it's true. Our team's holding a press conference at noon tomorrow, and inviting all the media. This is huge. This has to be the press conference announcing Ning as our coach. The Munich 1860 fans went wild again, jumping and roaring. Someone in the crowd shouted, check Jacob's social media. He just posted a picture of Ning on the streets of Munich. Ning's already here. Meyer roared, then that's it. Tomorrow's press conference is Ning's official signing with Munich 1860. Long live Munich 1860. The Blue Lion fan club members partied in the bar, celebrating Tong Yi's downfall and Ning's arrival in advance. They spread the news to other Munich 1860 fan clubs. Soon, every Munich 1860 fan knew that the team was replacing the coach tomorrow, that Tong Yi was out. The entire city of Munich was in an uproar. Countless Munich 1860 fans took to the streets to hug and cry with joy. They were as excited as they were after surviving a disaster. Some even set off fireworks, causing safety hazards. The Munich government deployed extra police to patrol the streets and maintain order. Those media reporters with a nose for news picked up the story from the fans, and some immediately reported that Munich 1860 would announce a new coach tomorrow. As soon as the fans saw those headlines, they felt vindicated. Tomorrow, Munich 1860 was getting a new coach. The fans of Munich 1860 were singing and dancing, celebrating. On the other side, after finishing his physical therapy after practice, Big Hoffman went directly to Little Hoffman and said, weren't you a little out of line this afternoon? You shouldn't have gone off on David. Big Hoffman thought Little Hoffman had lost his mind. Little Hoffman waved it off. Boss, you think I'm an idiot? Big Hoffman was taken aback. He wanted to say yes, but held back. Little Hoffman went on, you think I'd do that without knowing something? Let me tell you, this is coming straight from the top brass at the club, it's a done deal. Big Hoffman's eyes narrowed. He thought he knew where this was going. He nodded, muttering to himself, no wonder he did that. Still, he was a little uneasy, and asked, you sure about this? Little Hoffman pulled out his phone and showed him the online news. It was full of reports about Munich 1860 holding a press conference tomorrow to announce their new coach. Big Hoffman stared, speechless. Little Hoffman smirked and said, you still think I'm an idiot? Don't worry, pal, I'm not the one who's screwed now, it's that damn softy, ha 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 ha. 029, please bring Mr. Ning out. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The press conference hall at the Green Forest Avenue training base was packed. Reporters had flocked there, drawn by the buzz around Munich 1860. While typically a low-profile second-division team, the arrival of Tong Yi, the youngest head coach in German professional football history, had changed everything. Lately, Munich 1860 and Tong Yi were all the media could talk about. The biggest story, of course, was the fan backlash. Protests, sit-ins, the fans seemed determined to force a break with the team, which naturally attracted the press. Then, out of the blue, came the invitation to this press conference. Everyone knew something big was about to go down. Even reporters not on the guest list showed up, crowding the area, denied entry. Many simply stayed outside, conducting impromptu interviews. A large group of Munich 1860 fans had also gathered outside the Green Forest Street training base, buzzing with excitement. They believed they were about to witness a historic moment, the culmination of their war. They were sure the club had caved, agreed to fire Tong Yi, and hired local coach Ning. They finally saw hope, waving signs that read "Go away, you loser," and "Welcome Ning." They sang the Munich 1860 team anthem, drawing swarms of photographers. Inside the press conference hall, the atmosphere was equally charged. The reporters lucky enough to get in were already buzzing with speculation. Hannah, in a crisp white suit, turned to Jacob and asked, Jacob, is this really the coaching change press conference? That every ear in the room perked up. Munich 1860 hadn't officially announced that a new coach would be introduced, but that's the widespread belief. The fans and the media had both heard the rumors, but nobody knew for sure. However, everyone knew that Munich 1860's general manager, Stoffels, had secretly met with Ning, and Jacob had snapped the photos of Ning in Munich yesterday. If anyone knew the truth about the coaching situation, it was Jacob. Even Jacob didn't know the exact details of the press conference. But based on the last few days, a coaching change seemed practically guaranteed. He nodded. I don't have 100% confirmation, but based on my sources and some inside information, I'm basically certain Munich 1860 will announce a new coach today. Saying that, Jacob couldn't help feeling smug. You're done for, buddy. Hannah and the others nodded, understanding. Hannah added, if I remember correctly, that Chinese coach has only been in the job for a week, maybe 10 days, right? That the other reporters chuckled. Sounds about right. Jacob confirmed, today is only his 7th day. Hannah exclaimed, then he must be the shortest tenured head coach in Bundesliga history. A record breaker, for sure. Everyone laughed, their expressions dripping with sarcasm. Jacob, relishing the moment, said, Tong Yi's situation proves that cheating doesn't pay. This Chinese idiot thinks he can get away with anything because he found a woman to back him up. Give me a break. He's made a fool of himself. A reporter with glasses chimed in, he's not a big man. He's just a pretty face. Ha ha ha. The others joined in, their taunts and insults making Jacob's day. This was exactly what he wanted. You fool, you never stood a chance. Just then, the reporters started getting restless, urging the organizers to begin. Munich 1860's press officer, Dietrich, feeling the pressure, signaled for quiet, then hurried out of the hall. He found club chairman Baker and asked, Mr. Chairman, can we start the press conference? Baker didn't answer, turning instead to Tong Yi. You really don't want to come out with us, Tong Yi replied, go ahead. I'll be right behind you. Baker knew exactly what Tong Yi had planned. He silently pitted the reporters. Asterisk of all the people to mess with, you had to pick this strong-willed and vindictive Chinese guy. You brought this on yourselves, Baker nodded slightly. Alright, but try to keep things from getting too heated. Tong Yi replied, I know. Baker then turned to Detrick. We can start now. Detrick nodded to Baker, glanced at Tong Yi, and then walked back into the press conference hall. First of all, thank you all for coming, he announced. And apologies for the delay. I'm happy to announce that today's press conference will begin immediately. We've invited our Munich 1860 Club chairman Mr. Baker, general manager Mr. Stoffels and sports director Mr. Stuix. The reporters applauded, but their expressions were puzzled. Why isn't Ning here? Is he going to make a dramatic entrance later? Is Munich 1860 still trying to keep this a secret? Jacob frowned, feeling a twinge of unease. His eyes were glued to the entrance, waiting to see who would appear. Baker, on stage, noticed their diverted attention and sighed inwardly. These reporters are being played. Baker said, today, we've invited you all here to announce the signing of a new player. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. They were right. Today was the day Munich 1860 would introduce their new coach. The club was still trying to fool them, even though the media had been onto it for ages. Jacob visibly relaxed, puffing out his chest with pride. Baker saw the changing expressions and shook his head. If you don't control yourselves now, you'll really make fools of yourselves later. Baker paused, and the reporters grew impatient, turning to Jacob, the Bild reporter, for guidance. Jacob basked in the attention, reveling in the feeling of being on top. He was practically bursting with pride and felt a burning desire to humiliate Tong Yi again. See that, you has been. This is the difference between you and me. Sensing the unspoken request, Jacob addressed Baker. Mr. Baker, stop with the charade. Just tell us who the new coach is. I'm sure Mr. Ning must be getting tired of waiting. The others chimed in, yeah, bring out the new coach. Baker looked at the smiling faces, mentally offered them a moment of silence, and then said, now, let's welcome our club's new player. Every reporter swiveled towards the entrance, cameras poised, fingers on the shutter buttons, then, silence. The reporters were stunned, eyes wide, jaws dropped, as if frozen in place. Standing before them was the Chinese coach they thought had been fired. Jacob jumped to his feet, then sat back down hard, nearly drawing tears. But he didn't care. His gaze was fixed on Tong Yi, his mind reeling. How could it be him? Wasn't he sacked? What about Ning? The other reporters were just as flabbergasted, seeing their stunned reactions. Baker truly felt sorry for them. Tong Yi strode onto the stage, followed by the players he had signed. He grabbed the microphone from Detrick, brought it to his mouth, and said with a sneer, sorry to disappoint you all. I, Tong Yi, haven't been fired. I'm still the head coach of 1860 Munich. The room erupted in gasps. All eyes turned to Jacob, silently demanding an explanation. What's going on? You said this Chinese guy was finished. Why is he here? Jacob was livid, he could feel the ridicule and hatred burning into him. His reputation was in tatters. Who would ever believe him again? What would these reporters think of him? Jacob glared at Tong Yi, blaming him for everything. Tong Yi completely ignored Jacob, as if he didn't even exist. Tong Yi continued, whether you like it or not, I'm still the head coach of Munich 1860. Get used to it. Anyway, let's move on. Today's press conference is to introduce the players beside me. They are the new players our club signed this summer. From today on, they'll be an important part of our team, and we hope they will bring success to our club. I'd like to introduce them to you and all the Munich 1860 fans. Get ready to have new idols. Only then did the reporters notice the other figures beside Tong Yi. Suddenly, they were stunned, their faces etched with disbelief. Campbell, Senderos, and Hammond had actually signed with 1860 Munich. How was that even possible? Why would these players come to the second division? The younger players, including De Gea and Griezmann, were completely ignored. The reporters focused on Campbell and Senderos, hands shooting up, ready to fire questions. 0:30, the team's first game will start in 4 days. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Munich Sport, bombshell. World-class centre-back signs with Munich 1860, **** Munich Daily News, coach stays put. The soft-hearted manager still at the helm, **** Munich Aftenpost, Tong Yi, I'm still calling the shots at Munich 1860, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, lining who? Senderos is our new man, **** Leipzig Volkszeitung, madness. Soft-cooked coach unleashes 10 new players, **** Bild, dumbest coach ever. You can't win with has-beens and kids, **** Berlin Morning Post, coaching change. Munich 1860 pulled a fast one, **** Ruhr Daily News, 10 new faces, Tong Yi's stamp all over Munich 1860, Rheinische Post, disaster signings. Munich 1860 already doomed to relegation, **** Cologne Sport, led by Campbell Senderos, Green Forest welcomes 10 new players. The next day, German media exploded with the news of Munich 1860's massive roster overhaul. The arrival of 10 new players shocked fans everywhere. Nobody saw this coming. Munich 1860 practically rebuilt the entire team. Media outlets were quick to voice their opinions, and let's just say they weren't exactly optimistic. The consensus seemed to be, has Tong Yi lost it? Look at who he signed. A bunch of washed-up veterans and kids barely out of high school. Does he really think he can compete in the Bundesliga with this bunch of old-timers and rookies? It's a joke. Both the media and soccer pundits were highly skeptical of Tong Yi's recruitment strategy, Jacob wrote in his report. I honestly didn't think this soft-hearted coach could be worse than we imagined. The guy clearly doesn't know the first thing about soccer. His arrival is a curse on everyone associated with Munich 1860. Look at what he's done since he got here, a complete disaster. Just yesterday, he unveiled his 10 new signings. Let's take a look at who we're dealing with here. Campbell, former star player for the English national team, once a world-class defender. But that was then. Sure, he played in the Premier League last season, but the guy's 35 years old, his skills have deteriorated rapidly, and he's clearly lost the hunger for top-tier competition. That's why Portsmouth didn't renew his contract and let him walk as a free agent. Isn't this just a retirement gig for him? Campbell might have a big name, but he's past his prime. The soft-hearted coach just blew $1.6 million on a guy who's going to be a dead weight on the team. And Senderos? He's not the quasi-world-class defender he was a couple of years ago. Drogba beat him so badly, he's lost all his confidence, a complete waste of space. What's the point of bringing in Hammond, a defensive midfielder who was practically ready to hang up his boots? His body can't handle the professional game anymore. Another terrible signing. The rest are a bunch of nobodies, kids I've never even heard of. What can a bunch of 18-year-olds do? Other players at that age are still developing in the youth academy or the reserve team. Is this coach really planning to take on the world with a bunch of teenagers? Give me a break. How arrogant can you be, or how little respect do you have for the German second division? Based on these signings, this soft-hearted coach is clueless. He clearly doesn't understand professional soccer. I feel sorry for the Munich 1860 fans. Your suffering has just begun. Mark my words, in 4 days, Munich 1860 will play its first preseason friendly. Then you'll see how bad this guy is. Everyone will see what a terrible job he's done with these signings. Yes, in just 4 days, Munich 1860 was scheduled to play its first preseason friendly. The game would be held at the Allianz Arena, Munich 1860's home stadium. The opponent? Bayern Munich's youth team from the German Bundesliga. A mini Munich derby, if you will. Some now feel that Munich 1860 is only worthy of being called a derby with the Bayern Munich youth team and that they are not worthy of being compared with Bayern Munich at all. Originally, nobody paid much attention to this game, but Tong Yi's signings and Jacob's commentary fueled the flames. turning the friendly into a must-watch event. Of course, at this point, nobody was giving Munich 1860 a chance. The feeling was that Munich 1860 wasn't even as good as Bayern Munich's youth squad. Soccer pundits joined the chorus, questioning and criticizing Tong Yi. Munich 1860 fans were furious, staging another protest outside the club's headquarters. They were losing their minds. Expectations had been high, and the disappointment was crushing. What they thought would be the unveiling of a new head coach turned into an embarrassing circus for the soft coach. They were angry, absolutely livid. These signings had them in despair. They chanted, "Fire the soft-hearted coach. Get him out of Munich." Tong Yi was under attack. His signings had ignited the fans' fury. They were doing everything they could to get rid of him, and things were getting ugly. Munich 1860 flags and jerseys were set ablaze outside the club building in protest. Several fan organizations jointly submitted a letter, vowing not to buy season tickets for the upcoming season unless Tong Yi was fired. They were at war with Tong Yi and insisted on bringing in Ning, not a softie. Tong Yi was the target of their rage. Of course, not everyone was critical of Tong Yi. Dortmund coach Klopp, when interviewed, said, "David is a bright and talented young man. He's Coach Frank's most prized student, and someone I admire greatly. His tactical insights are fascinating and thought-provoking. I can't say for sure if he can lead Munich 1860 to the top of the Bundesliga, but his talent is undeniable. I'll let you in on a little secret. If Munich 1860 had contacted David a few minutes later, he would have been our assistant coach at Dortmund. That's why I'm so optimistic about him." Klopp's support came as a surprise, but then, people remembered that Tong Yi and Klopp were from the same school, and it all made sense. Of course, nobody really believed Klopp. It was just a fellow coach helping out a friend. Frank also spoke up in defense of his protégé. "David is a hardworking and gifted coach. He was with me for only 3 years, but he exceeded my expectations. I think it might be too early for him to go it alone as head coach, but he's not as bad as everyone says. His time at Munich 1860 might not be a success story, and it might not last long, but it will be a valuable learning experience. He's young, and the future is wide open. I support him, no matter what, and I believe he can do well." Frank's words were much more measured than Klopp's, and people were more receptive to them. The consensus was that even Tong Yi's own mentor wasn't all that confident in him. So why did Munich 1860 have so much faith in him? Why not fire him and bring in Ning? Did the team really need a soft-hearted coach to drag Munich 1860 to the bottom of the standings before finally waking up and firing him? The Munich 1860 fans were chanting, calling for the team to fire the soft coach. The fans were especially angry because the team had deceived them. If there wasn't going to be a coaching change, why put them through this? Their hatred for Tong Yi and the club's management grew. They were eagerly anticipating the game in 4 days, ready to watch the soft coach get humiliated. The media was already hyping up the upcoming friendly match between Munich 1860 and Bayern Munich's youth team. It was the first game under the new head coach, and everyone was curious to see what Tong Yi could bring to Munich 1860, but Tong Yi wasn't paying attention to the noise. He was focused on training. As before, Pintus was leading the team on the training field. The Munich 1860 players were still going through pre-season physical conditioning, building a foundation for the season ahead. As such, they hadn't yet started on new tactics, which was making the players anxious. They felt they should be practicing tactics, not wasting time with physical training. This physical training was doing nothing but wearing them out. After all, soccer wasn't track and field. Skills and tactics were what mattered. To be honest, Campbell was starting to have doubts. Sure, he was getting older, and his physical fitness had declined, but even compared to younger players, this physical training was brutal. If a guy as strong as him was struggling, what about everyone else? If Tong Yi hadn't told him repeatedly that physical fitness would be the basis for the new tactics, Campbell would have given up long ago. This training was pure torture. The other new signings were also complaining, but they were gritting their teeth and pushing through. They were worried. They knew their fate was tied to Tong Yi's. If he got fired in 3 months, they'd likely be sent down to the reserve team. They were determined to keep going. Tong Yi was pleased with the players' efforts. He also sensed their anxieties. He approached them and said, "You've been working on physical conditioning for over a week, and the results are great. In 2 days, we'll start training on the new tactics. Get ready, because we're entering the most critical phase of the preseason. Anyone who slacks off now won't be starting in the new season. Let's go." That the Munich 1860 players breathed a sigh of relief. Tactical training was finally about to begin. Of course, some were skeptical. Was this tactical training coming a little late? The first friendly match was just 2 days away. Was that enough time to prepare? Tong Yi didn't seem to care. Instead, he glared at little Hoffman with cold eyes. He said, "There's no room for you on the first team anymore. What are you doing here? Get out." Little Hoffman shot Tong Yi a vicious look. Little Hoffman had planned to come here today and apologize. He assumed that Tong Yi would turn a blind eye and not make a fuss. But this jerk was showing him no respect, not even for what he has done for the team. He was furious. Big Hoffman stepped in to stop him, trying to smooth things over with Tong Yi. Tong Yi glared at little Hoffman and shouted, "As long as I'm here, you can forget about ever playing on the first team again." That he turned to the rest of the players and shouted, "I'm in charge here. Anyone who wants to end up like him can go to the reserve team. There's no room for you here." Tong Yi then stormed off, leaving behind a group of silent players and an enraged little Hoffman.